All right, so we are officially recording. Thank you so much for tuning in and sharing in this now moment with myself and with one another. I have the lovely Jess here from Yothera, Jessica, and she is a sister of mine, and we've been connecting in dream time even.
Yep, apparently so.
Would seem. And we're just going to play a little bit. We didn't really know where we were going with this, and then we connected and talked a little bit before hitting this record button, and now we're seeing that we're just going to play and kind of branch out from there, because a lot of the things that we're experiencing, everybody's experiencing on the collective. As always, though, I'd like just to maybe we'll feel to share a little bit about what you do, because I do think it's important. If people are just now kind of tuning in, for some reason you found this video for the first time, Jess and I work very similarly in a lot of ways. We're both yoga teachers, and we both are energy light workers, and we have a lot of similar things. That's part of the reason we've connected, is we have this connection through, well, we'll go into that maybe a little bit later, but I'll let Jess kind of introduce herself real quick, if you wouldn't mind, Jess.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I am a mental health therapist by trade and a licensed clinical social worker, and also a yoga therapist. And I also do breath work, and recently have been coming out as kind of I call them my insight readings, where they are multidimensional readings where I tap into your higher self, and we can receive messages for you in your own, in very unique way. So that's been fun, and Carrie helped kind of ignite that part of me and the work that I'm here to do. So yeah.
Yeah, and Jess gave me a reading too. It was only like 10 minutes, and I was blown away. I was like, that's awesome. It was really specific and really really cool. I really resonated with it. It was so she definitely got the gift. And I think, we were kind of talking earlier about some of the things that we've been experiencing, but since you just kind of touched on that, you've just kind of come out of the closet about your intuitive readings, essentially, I wanted to maybe start on that, because I do feel like a lot of the lightworker community, and this recently kind of came out for you, where you're feeling comfortable enough to share it, or it's unfolded and expanded more for you to where you can realize what you're tapping into. And I had just noticed that as well. And maybe that's where we'll start, and then we'll go into some of the energies that we've been feeling and seeing in readings and whatnot. And I was telling Jess that she was in my dream last night, and we keep getting these messages: go big, like stop playing small. And I have given this message to others, and even I have been hesitant about just being like, yeah, let's do it on a bigger platform, and let's do talks and all of this, and let's not hide out anymore, and not share what we really have to offer, because there are layer after layer after layer. But what I've been seeing is it's shifting for a lot of people. So what started out for you is, and I don't know if you were clinical, I always call you clinical psychiatrist, but counselor,
Yeah.
very similar. And then the yoga teacher and all of that kind of morphed and then came into energy, and it's just expanded.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what I've seen for me as well. It's just expanded. I don't have the same credentials that you have in that same way, but mine started with the Pilates and the yoga and breath work and meditation, and then in Reiki, and then kind of expanded from there to doing readings. And for me, mine is a lot of writing. Like, I write in code and I bring it through in that way. But just even yesterday, I've just been guided to just not even write it down first, which is really uncomfortable for me. And that's kind of what I want to go into, is this discomfort of wanting to expand. Sometimes that can be the resistance of, I have a tendency, even though I talk about be spontaneous, and I struggle with that myself. And a lot of the things that I teach are because I've gone through them in my own way. And so for me, in the last couple of days, what I would usually do is write out, before I connect with someone, I write out this poetry or code that I then share, as you know, in session, or I just do it through videos that I'm sharing with everybody. Oh, did you get that feedback?
I totally did. That was weird.
Let's again. Okay, I think I'm recording now. So we were just talking about this feedback, and I'm going to repeat what I just said because I see that as so symbolic, and I'm going off topic for a second, but it literally is going out like a wave, and it's happening to everybody. So this is happening to everybody on a different level or different layer. And I know that we have a tendency to talk about multidimensionality as 3D, 4D, 5D, but it isn't that. It is now. And I'm going to stop talking in just a moment and let you kind of talk about this, Jess. But what I wanted to share was, for me, the way that I do things and the way that I'm used to, doing these sessions with other light workers is changing every day. And I just started doing it in my car yesterday. I was driving in my car and I was like, I'm just going to tap into this particular light worker that I'm going to be working with later today, because I didn't have the time to sit down and write it all out, because it takes like 10 minutes approximately for me to do that, 15 minutes. And it just came through and I was shocked. It's like your Akashic record stuff.
Yeah. And, actually, as you're speaking, I was understanding that many people are experiencing non-attachment right now, but not because they want to, but I think this next chapter that we're moving into is forcing us to be more in the moment and flow, and to just kind of allow things to unfold, which is really hard on our ego. It's really hard on our sense of wanting to control everything and have all of this like neat and tidy life. And but the energies aren't supportive of that, because that's not how we create. Like, creating is only in the present moment. And so the more we try and control, I think the more we're going to get some backlash potentially with these new energies that we're moving into.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny. And I mean, we've talked about this, but I'm seeing it even on a personal scale so big that it can throw us off balance a little bit sometimes. And that's a good sign that, okay, I might be in resistance right now, or I might be integrating something, and just sometimes we get hung up. I've talked about this before on like, well, why? Well, what? Well, how can I fix this? And I think even that has shifted, don't you? Like,
yes, and it really is shifting how we do our work with other people too, especially those coming to me for, they want, quote, therapy. And I have to really explain now that I don't work with treatment plans anymore, because what's true one day is so not true like a week later, even the next day. And we're just moving through things so quickly that we almost have to work in a different way with people.
Yeah, and this is kind of, we're sharing this for a lot of the people that are watching who are, it's not just for starseeds and light workers. You can be a light worker doing anything, and maybe we can go into that too. But there are a lot of us that watch, that connect with Jess and I, who also are counselors, yoga teachers, do readings, do tarot cards, read palms, read art, whatever, use their gifts in that expansive way, and that's what they do for their career, so to speak. And that, I think a lot of people, I think we went through this similar maybe a year or two ago. I remember a lot of people back a year or two ago going, I don't know who I am anymore. I could read tarot cards before, and now none of the messages are the same. And I'm using tarot cards as an example, because somebody might have been doing that for years, and all of a sudden they're drawn to astrology, for example, and they don't know anything about it, but that's what they want to follow. And we're going to have that resistance of, but I know the tarot cards, right? I'm using that as a basic example, not to pick on tarot cards. It could be the other way around.
And I think we're being drawn without understanding logically why we're being drawn to certain things. And that can be uncomfortable too, of just like, why am I being drawn to this particular information that my brain would never want to, but then we keep going back to it and it feels right to us. But if somebody would ask us how we know that, it would almost be impossible to explain how we know that something's true. Like, that's my personal experience of knowing at a different level.
Yeah, it's intuitive, much more
Definitely.
intuitive than it has been, I think, in the past.
Yeah,
And that's
definitely.
come from us learning to trust ourselves. So part of this is about trusting that it is moment to moment to moment. And I want to go back because you said things are, you used to have a treatment plan and things are changing, things have changed so quickly that that treatment plan is just thrown out the window. And I want to touch briefly on that because it's not just things have changed in the, let's say, the client's life in that moment. It's literally changed in how we perceive what's going on in the client's life and how they perceive what's going on. Because in a week's time, it's almost like a year has gone by.
Yeah. And time is speeding up. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and we have everything is being forced to change because of this new time. Would you call it time or would you call it like no moving into less time, like no time? I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's
I
really,
can't tell.
I get I get so many messages about time that I write in code and I still don't understand it. I'll be honest. Like to me, it's so mind-boggling. So
Yeah.
for me, it's almost like a different space. Like
Yeah.
it
Like another
isn't. I kind of got this message a few weeks back that time was something we created, and even time itself is misunderstood. Like we
mm,
don't really understand it in it, and it was created. I wrote this whole thing. I'll have to go back and look at it, and then I'll share it with you. But something about taking off the watch because I was guided to look at it like we're watching something, and this
mm,
puts us into the future, and it puts us
mhm.
into the past. And even though we might be watching it go moment to moment to moment, it isn't real.
Right. Right.
So
It's our perception, our watching of it.
yeah, exactly. And who's watching? So that's where this new element of us comes in. Who is the watcher, the observer? And what are we really watching? I mean, it literally is like Alice in Wonderland right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And to really step into this understanding that we do create our own reality. So our perception, it starts internally, right? So our inner vision is what creates our world or our external vision. And so it's almost like maybe we all are living in a completely different reality because we're all seeing different things based on our perception. And
Yeah.
that's why it's like it's so important to be in non-judgment and neutrality right now, because we can't get pulled, we're getting pulled into all these other agendas and perceptions that are really taking us away from being more in our sovereignty and our neutral, like 0 point kind of space in our heart.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of this, it's funny because the perceptions, like somebody yesterday might be drawn into a certain, let's say, rabbit hole, and then all of a sudden they wake up the next day and it doesn't even interest them anymore because they've
Yeah.
integrated it, or it's no longer a part of who they are in that moment, which
Yeah.
is really cool. I mean, it's really neat to see that. And I just want to say for those of us that are just like, what is going on? I don't know who I am, where I am. I'm so upset about everything that's happening around me. It can be really difficult because it's new and it can be difficult to understand. And that's kind of what we're saying in this moment is it's really about just feeling, getting into the heart and acknowledging what you're feeling in that moment because it could change in 5 minutes.
Yeah. And sometimes
Or
it does
yeah,
completely change. Yeah.
yeah. So there was something else that you brought up. I kind of went into like 5 different places when you were talking earlier, right before I went everywhere. Everybody. And there was something key that you had talked about as far as, so I wanted to, now that I'm in this space, this is important to talk about too because this happens a lot.
Mhm.
Like, where did I just go? What was I just thinking about? And it's not even important anymore.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
It'll come
Yep.
up again. So for those
Well,
of you that are really forgetful,
well, it's like downloads. That's what it feels like to me. Is I get something, and then it integrates, and then that's it. Like I don't need to do anything with it.
yeah, I love that. That was part of, I think, what we were talking about earlier too, is we don't have to focus on it so much. Like we don't have to sit there and dissect it. Just,
Yeah.
all right, I just had that thought. It's not there anymore. Do I need to? Nope,
Yeah.
it's good.
Well, and I wonder, like, I'd love to bring this up and see how you feel about this, but I've also been feeling for me personally that as I integrate more and clear more emotionally, I feel less emotion for a shorter period of time. So like emotion is like part of the frequency that's creating this dense consciousness, and as I clear a lot of this emotion, it's almost like I have less emotional roller coasters. Or if I do have a little bit of an emotional outburst, it lasts like a fourth of the amount of time that it used to
Sure.
last. It clears. So I don't know if I've been hearing a little bit more of that as people move into neutrality and
Yeah,
yeah, more
almost
into
like when we're feeling, from my perspective, it's like if we're allowing ourselves to feel in that moment that emotion, we're not then like, putting it into a compartment and saving it for later and letting it build up, because then
yeah.
that holds that charge. It just allows us. I'm distracted because my dog is dreaming and his
Oh my
tail
God,
is
that's cute.
his tail is, he's totally
Oh,
asleep right now dreaming. um Sounds like a little whip. But
yeah,
yeah, it's almost like when we allow ourselves to just, oh, I'm feeling sad,
yeah.
okay, or feel like crying. Like a lot of times people do, like, especially, like I always say, if you're someplace and you can't cry, go to the bathroom. Cry it out. Go, if you're in your car and you feel like, just like, we have, it's like this idea of like, I can't cry, I've got to get to work, and just cry it out. If you're worried
Yeah.
about, just let it go. And sometimes that in itself allows us to integrate so much faster. And I do feel like these emotions are also attached to other things that maybe we've held on to from past lifetimes and parallel universes, however you want to look at it. I'm into all of that, and I always feel like sometimes we tap into those things and
Yeah.
we don't even know why it's going on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think a
So
lot of, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, maybe we're integrating the emotions quicker because we're allowing them to come up faster, and then we just move through them faster.
Yeah. So I think that would be a key thing, just to recognize. And I think also congratulating ourselves for doing that, because I've talked to quite a few people this week who, I call it it's like this. So we're so used to having to take time to process. So again, like I'm used to going and writing, and I might have gone into that space of, oh, what a bummer. I'm not, I might have like mourned a little bit because I enjoy that process. I'm recognizing it's not gone. It's just different for every person that I work with, which I already knew that. But there's that ego aspect of me, and I want to talk a little bit about the ego for just a second too. But so there's this idea of that loop. Like even that, something that simple can put us into this loop of,
Yeah.
I don't need to worry about it. It doesn't matter. Let it go. And so sometimes people are in that habit of having to compartmentalize everything or figure it out. And then all of a sudden it's gone and they don't need to figure it out. And it's like this moment of their bereft. Is that the right word that's coming through? It's like they feel like they're missing something because they haven't put enough time into it.
Uh-huh.
It's like this
But
habit.
yeah, this habit of like, if it's a big deal, I have to process it for hours, or I have to talk it out with somebody, or I have to, yeah, I'm there
Yeah.
with you. Like I'll process things like so much quicker, and my brain thinks I need to have that conversation with that person, or I need to take some time and journal, and it's like, but all of a sudden it just is gone.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, exactly. So sometimes we can feel like we're missing something there. And I think that's a little bit of a habitual pattern that we've gotten into. And the cool thing about that is not only are we now integrating that emotion, but we're recognizing the pattern if we allow
Yeah,
ourselves. And we're integrating that as well.
isn't that great? It's so much faster. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
it can be a little discombobulating, like all of this. To go back to that though, because it's like like you said, it's like our brain or even our habits are lingering there, and they're like, whoa, what just happened? How do I now? What do I do now? And
yeah,
so um, these I want to talk a little bit about the ego because I had a really beautiful conversation with someone this week who has been going through a break. Those, we've all done this. We've gone through a breakup for a really long time, even though we've already been broken up for a really long time. It's like
Yep.
we're breaking up for months and months and months, and then we have this conversation like, well, how long ago did you end this relationship? And they're like, well, like 6 months ago. So you guys are already broken up, right? And we've all been, I mean, I've done it, we've all been through that, and this is no judgment at all, but I'm using this as an example because I had brought up ego to this person. And I still think that there's this concept that ego is a bad thing, or that ego means we're full of ourselves. And I just thought I wanted to get your kind of vision on that, because from my perspective, I mean, we could go do a whole show on ego, and that's not where I want to go. I just want to touch on this briefly and just share that from my perspective, the way that I said it is, ego isn't, first of all, it's not a bad thing. It isn't just shadow, and it isn't just being full of yourself. Like, we have this tendency to think egotistical means you're just full of yourself. It can also work in the other way, like, I'm not good enough, which becomes, I think, part of the ego, for whatever reason, for survival, for different, like, I'm not good enough and that makes me different, and that's, or I'm a martyr, I'm not good enough, I can't. And I saw this pattern within this particular person, and I said, you're feeding your ego. And they were like, what do you mean? I said, you're doing the opposite, and that's still feeding your ego. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about that if you feel.
Sure. Yeah, I see ego as anything that we're attached to about our identity of who we are. So, from a developmental perspective, we start developing ego as soon as we can speak, most of the time understand language, because then that's when we can start creating stories in our mind about our worth, and are we lovable, and then all of these layers that then become behaviors and thoughts, and then they become behaviors. And so there's all these layers around beliefs that become thoughts that become behaviors, which is then how we start to project out into the world. And so ego is just kind of our identity that has so many layers to it, and it can be shadow for sure. We work with ego and shadow work all the time, but I agree with you. Ego is just anything that we're attached to, that we how we identify ourselves in the world.
Yeah.
So
I think that's important to realize that it's okay to have an ego. I mean, we have an identity. It's part of us. And I know a lot of people have talked about this, but I still see that coming up for a lot of people. Like, if I use that word, people are like, ooh, like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like,
that's like part of being human, though.
Exactly. Thank you. And I think that's important to talk about too, because I think sometimes we're just too hard on ourselves, and we're like, oh, I should have already processed this. I'm not, and that's something else that I think is coming up for a lot of people.
Yeah. Like, I should be farther along.
Yeah.
You mean? Well, that's the ego.
Exactly.
Right? Because, like, if you think you should be farther along, then that's kind of like pointing towards a story that you might hold about yourself. Like, I should be perfect or whatever.
Yeah, I should be. And that's future tripping. That's taking us out of the present moment and putting us into future, past, whatever. I also see the ego as being really connected to the, I don't know what's going on with my light. I look a little like an orange person. Do you remember that movie from, what is it? It's Guardians of the Galaxy. There's like the pink girl in it. If I can't get my camera fixed, I'm like, I'm going to have to put some investments in better lighting. Maybe I am. I'm pulling through my pink version from another planetary existence in these videos. Sometimes I pull through my blue version, that's for sure. I think we'll touch on that briefly too, because I get a lot of, and I don't know if you're getting this on the Akashic side, where people really want their galactic history.
Well, I was going to say, for me, what's been coming through is I'm actually tapping into, I think it's called the Halls of
Amenti.
Yeah. And so and again, this is all kind of new to me, but I think that's actually what I'm tapping into, because I receive messages through like images and very earthy type messages that aren't very galactic. Like
Yeah.
very rarely do I get galactic messages for people.
Yeah. That's
Uh,
interesting.
I
Yeah, I was
know, but I
curious
don't
about
know.
that.
Yeah.
Well, I think I get mine shift. Sometimes I get galactic. 90% of the time, well, I shouldn't say that. It's been like 50-50. Sometimes I get it and sometimes, for most of the time from my perspective is when I'm working with someone based on my own, it's whatever's most needed in that now moment. And I think sometimes the galactic flavor can be distracting for people rather than focus. We're here now on a body, in a body on Earth.
Right.
And we've already got that galactic flavor inside of us. So
Right.
ultimately, part of I think what we're experiencing is, the separation and duality and ethnicity. And while it's important to know our heritage and to know our roots for a lot of many good and important reasons, it's also important to recognize that it's all inside of us. So we are all a little bit of everything, and we've been many different things in past lives, future lives. I mean, I've been blue. I know that. I've seen it, and I've seen it with other people as well. I'm just using that as an example. I got goosebumps again because there is this aspect. I think ego is tying in with this a little bit, and duality and separation. And really, it's about us recognizing how different and diverse we are, and how beautiful that is, and bringing it back into, we are all of those things. We have been all of those things. We've been crystals, we've been rocks, we've been black, we've been white, we've been blue, we've been pink. And I think that's so important. I think a lot of people, what's going on out in the world is either helping to show the distortions that we have around those views, or showing us the distortions that we have within ourselves about those things. Do you have anything maybe you want to add to that? That's a big one.
Yeah, that is a big one because I think it's almost what I've been practicing is how to show up in like understanding and having respect for other people's experiences while also not attaching to um, being a white woman. You know what I mean? Like I know it's weird, but I mean I agree with you. We've been all of it, and if we understand that we're a fractal of source, we're literally like a fractal of
Yeah.
source, and that means we are all. And I think that's what's difficult is when you say that in mainstream communication, it feels or sounds really dismissive of someone's individual experience. So it's hard to really be able to hold both, to hold like the individual experience and then also under this broader perspective of
from a place of neutrality.
From a place of neutrality, yeah. And from the, I said this in a message that I recorded the other day, but I feel like a lot of us are starting to see through the eyes of like Mother Earth and how she really sees us, and she doesn't see things in the same ego duality, or she sees everything, the sun shines on everyone.
Everybody is her child.
Everything is one. It's all the same.
Yeah.
So hopefully we're stepping more into that actually through all of these situations.
Well, I think the separation and the way that people have been mistreated over the years as a human collective, and every single race, as far as we'll say through each lineage, has experienced really awful things from a human perspective. I mean, if you look back on it, it's all of these things have happened, and we're, I think, really seeing how wrong from, like you said, from a non-egoic, like if we're in a total place of Mother Earth and we're seeing things from her, she would not want any of us going through this. But we've all put each other through this, and it's such in our face right now that it's like we cannot ever again, moving forward into a new earth, support that type of energy. And it is about treating each other with respect, no matter who we are, and honoring people in their journey. And I just think it's important to just bring that up because I'm may not have experienced the same things in my lifetime that somebody else of a different color, ethnicity, race has experienced in this lifetime. And I am well aware of that, and I completely respect that. And I honor whatever they've experienced. And from my perspective, my heart goes out to anyone who's experienced something that has made them feel less than. And moving forward, if we can recognize that nobody should be made to feel less than, but at the same time, we have to hold within ourselves that we are not less than. I mean, it works in so many different multidimensional aspects, like embracing everything as us and pulling it into our heart and just loving one another for who we are. And loving our diversity is so important. It's such a theme right now because this is in the process, I hope, of dissolving and hopefully never being an issue again. Would that be beautiful?
Yeah, and even from like a cosmic perspective, I wonder if things like this are getting us to really start to embrace other beings that are different than us, right? Because I mean, we talk about disclosure and other like alien races and things like that, and I personally feel like this is a step in that direction to being like open to seeing other people and like that are different than us, that look different than us. This isn't just the black and white thing, it's the LGBT, it's the all of the things that are kind of working our psyches, stepping kind of towards that.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is so I don't know about you, but when I first started having a lot of things happen, I know a lot of people have had visitations and they've had positive experiences with ETs and not so positive experiences with ETs. When I was in a really fear-based state of mind, and I was like, everything was talking to me, and I was like, what is going on? I was kind of freaking out years ago. I saw beings, and I realized that at the time, I mean, I was freaked out about all of them. And I never thought, I was like, really tall, dark, scary looking beings. And I'm like, what is that? And now I'm like, bring it on. But at the time, like, it was a good wake up call. Like, are you ready for this? Are you ready to see some green lizard person walk into your room and just be like, hey, Carrie, I'm your brother from another. Or I'm you. I'm a version of you in the sixth dimension. Like, what? It's interesting. And that I think a lot of people are, there, and we're seeing a lot more. My husband just showed me a video this morning of some lights that were in the sky. And my husband's not into really any of this. And he's like, check this out. I was like, oh, okay, cool. But yeah, what are we going to do when a big old tall blue person comes out and just says, hey, let's have a conversation. I can see somebody just going, ew, just passing out.
Right. Which is, I think, why they don't, I mean, I believe anyway that they really care about our well-being and that they're not here to scare us. And so they're baby stepping us into this.
Yeah, I think so too. Like, all right, if you can't play with each other, and they're not, it is kind of like, what's that movie, Men in Black? I mean, Star Wars, Star Trek. I mean, that's what it is. It's like, that's disclosure. And we think of it as fantasy, but there are really beings that exist in other dimensions that it would be only our ego if we thought that everybody looked like us. Like, that's just our ego. And that's also us assuming that we're the only, we're the center of the universe. It's like that, it's, sorry, hate to break it to you, but we aren't.
Totally. Well, and maybe this is a little edgy too, but this kind of came up for me, is like, even this term being a starseed or being like one of the 144 or whatever, it's like, I also feel ego in that at times of like, oh, I'm one. I mean, I came from a religious background that was really traumatic. So I kind of already have triggers around like, you're the special one, like because everybody wants to feel special. You know,
Yeah.
I was told I was the chosen part of the chosen people my whole life, right? And so like I'm kind of like resistant to being a star seed even because I'm like,
Yes.
well, that's the same kind of thing. You know, everyone wants to feel special.
I love
But
that you're bringing that up.
yeah, and but we all are special. So I'm not saying it's not okay to embrace that, but to really not allow ego to be like, well, I'm here to kind of like help other people to ascend. It's like, well, no, we're all just kind of here working our shit out.
Yeah. It's so, yeah. I think that has been, it's interesting. I kind of thought that that had faded a lot, like faded out a lot because of like the age of the guru is over. Like we've been hearing that, I think, in our community for quite some time. However, I do still see it in the collective. I see gurus out there advertising, and I see people proclaiming themselves to have that. And so I want to talk a little bit about, let's play with that, because I do think that's like an important thing that's coming up for a lot of us. And I think this all ties in with neutrality and just being in that moment of acknowledging that we are all in this together, but we are all diverse. And if we look at each other as is a diversity in oneness rather than in levels,
Yes.
you know, we're all teachers. You teach me just as much as I teach you, and we teach one another. We're all students. We're all learning. We're all expanding. And the thing that I was always taught or told when I was tapping in with my guidance in the beginning was, like you said, don't attach to any one of these things, because I could have easily come out, and I did in the beginning. It's interesting because my first videos, I was learning with everybody else, but I was just guided to share it because part of that is people also feeling like they're learning with me, and I never feel like anything that I've ever say is 100% right or wrong. It's
Mhm.
it's different, and to each of his own, each of her own. And we could really be attached. Like when I had visions of, we'll talk about me being blue. I've had many visions of lifetimes of being blue, for example. And I honed the in. I'm like, oh, Sirius. And then I was like, oh, Andromedan. And I had all these galactic flavors. And then I was guided, like, it isn't about that. It's about who you are now. You're all of those things embodied in this particular skin technology suit. And so you can tap into that at any moment. So it was that I was being taught unattachment. But it was also the same with my lineage. Like I was seeing a lot of my Native American, coming through in shamanic practices that I've been over and over again. And I've had other, we might then go to a star seed or a light worker, or, and we'll talk about the whole star seed thing in just a minute too. And they might say, oh, well, you are a galactic Syrian, and your mission is da 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 da. And then that person's like, oh, that's me. And then automatically, which there's nothing wrong with that. That's a really cool experience, and it's an important part of our experience, I think. Sometimes we need that to integrate that aspect of us. But it is not attaching ourselves to that definition, defining only into that like piece of the whole, because we're a whole puzzle, not just one little piece.
I love that. Yeah, I love what you said about we're not like instead of having levels that we're all. Even the word leader is a little bit doesn't even feel right to me anymore. Like that was kind of like this word for a while, like leadership. And I even like some of the trainings I just did used the word like how to embody your leadership, and it's like even that doesn't even feel right anymore, because then it's like this. It kind of feels like you're leading people instead of, it feels more like we're stepping into collaborative support.
Yeah.
Like I take your course and someone takes my course, and then my people get connected to your people, and we all are sharing gifts in a very different way.
Yeah, it's like the scientists. If you're labeled, let's say your label is a scientist, and you're working in a community of scientists sharing information, if you're not in your ego.
Yeah, right.
But we know that that's been difficult for many scientists to be able to collaborate, because then there becomes that, well, this person got this first, so they're going to get this, and then it becomes this pulling apart of separation again, which is what I think in this new what we're rolling into, that's going to dissolve as well. And that might be a conversation we'll lead into in just a moment. But I love the whole starseed label. So I was guided to just change my thing from keep it simple starseeds to like keep it simple starflowers. Like, we're already flowered. We're not like these little seeds that are waiting to be germinated or waiting to come through. We've arrived. So it's us recognizing that, and not labeling us just as the stars, because we are here on Earth, and Earth is our mother, and this is our home base, our home planet. So, but Earth is also connected to all of the other planets. They all work together to create this galaxy. So there really is this idea of concept of not attaching. So how do we keep our diversity and uniqueness and not attach to these labels of, well, I'm a light worker. Everybody's a light worker. Or
everyone's a light.
Yeah. It's like, how do we find that? That might be kind of fun to tap into.
Yeah, it would. I mean, I think just owning that, not trying to be something that you might see outside of yourself, or not trying to replicate something that someone else is doing. I mean, that's, if somebody inspires you or something inspires you, that's one thing, because it's just showing back to you what's already within you if somebody's inspirational. But just understanding that not one thing has the same DNA in this whole universe. Like, everything is so
unique,
diverse, unique, and maybe just understanding that.
It's interesting you say that, because do you remember like the last year, I felt like, or let's just put the last 5 years into perspective. And it was like, okay, what you were just talking, I think, is like being your authentic self. So there were these layers, like, and I see it in everything, like, okay, the Lionsgate portal, it's about roar, it's about the throat, it's about the fire, it's about Lyran energy, it's about, all of that, Leo. So there's all these different dimensional aspects, right? And then we've got, let's say, the being your authentic self. And so there's been these like moments of, this is what we're going through, this is what we're going through. And now it's everything. Although I do think diversity is the kind of the key word right now. Uniqueness and oneness and diversity is kind of what we're going through in a stage, as well as purging and getting rid of that parasitic ego. So it is kind of, that is a theme I think we're all experiencing right now. But I think within that are all of these other things that we've experienced that are now being utilized to help us go through this purge and be speak our truth. And so if we're copying somebody else because we admire them, and I don't say this in judgment, because I think we've all done that to a certain extent. Like, when I was, even when we were younger, we copied our friend because they dressed cool. Like, oh, I'm going to wear, I still see, I'm going to get that bracelet because I really think that looks good on her. Like, that is just because we like what somebody else is doing, and we say, okay, that's mine. There is no mine. There is no, I'm only me and you're copying me. That's not where I'm coming from. But there is that fine line of recognizing, that whole concept of woke, to really just being.
Yep. And I love that. I think we're moving into that, more of that stage of not, like my partner is, he's a psychologist, and he's very, logical. And I think he's the most awake person, if you want to, like, just kind of like what we're attaching to is what that looks like.
We're going to label it for a moment.
Right. Like for a minute, but really, like, to get out of this idea that you have to be spiritual to be woke.
Yeah.
I think that's really unfair to a lot of people.
I love that. So that kind of reins it back in, because I got a little off on a tangent. That kind of reins it back into not only the labels, being our authentic self, which doesn't mean we have to follow somebody, it doesn't mean we have to. So there's so many where places we could go with this. But your, I know plenty of people who are just good-hearted people.
Yep.
That don't know anything about our galactic history, and they don't need to.
Yep.
Because they're there. They're owning it. They're real. They're in their heart, and everywhere they go, they're bringing light.
Totally. And intention, they have like heart-based intention. I think that's really what it comes down to, is their heart is open and they're living in the present moment, doing the best that they can, making the best choices that they can given what they have as far as information.
Yeah, and then sometimes those attachments, and sometimes knowledge is power, and sometimes knowledge, if we associate and attach ourselves too much with that knowledge, can actually take us away from our inner knowingness and power, because again, we're attaching ourselves to the 144,000, or this is our mission, and dictating to others what they need to be doing and how they need to be acting, and this particular teaching is true and this particular teaching is false. And it's like, well, what perspective are you getting that from? And if we are changing, I'm going to go a little weird and multidimensional here for a moment. So if we are changing moment to moment, and we really are, time has no, so doesn't that mean we're kind of rewriting history? Like, I love thinking about that. Like, so doesn't that mean that those teachings that were correct in so many ways no longer apply in a lot of ways? Like, and that can be any teaching. And I have so many books. I love books. I love teachings. But I also recognize energetically, like, some of the things were written for a lower density frequency, and those were the things that needed to happen, and that was the story. The story has changed. New pages have been added. They just aren't necessarily, and maybe they are, because maybe they have been added, and now we'll have that Mandela effect. We'll be like, what book is that? That was never in the Bible. Oh yeah, it's been there the whole time. Don't you know?
Right. Well, I've actually been hearing, do you know Sandra Walters?
I love Sandra Walters, yeah.
She actually mentioned the Mandela effect, and that, that might start to happen.
Oh, that's funny. I haven't watched her most recent. I think I watched part of something that she talked about. I really enjoy her in general. I love how neutral she is. And I enjoy, she has a guided meditation, just to share, by the way. Anybody who's looking for a really good meditation that is like, I think it's like 20 minutes, and it gets you there fast. You can go onto her YouTube page and check it out. She's got like
is it the yellow one, the DNA activation?
Yeah, I think so. It's
good.
Really good. So I think before we go on, because I kind of want to talk about how important the meditation aspect is, because that in just a minute. But so this labeling and this idea, we don't have to put ourselves into a box. Like, we don't have to say I am. It's like, I am that I am. I am that, I am that, I am that. And still maintain our own uniqueness, because because everything from our perspective is not the same perspective as the person next to us is going to have. That in itself makes us unique. We don't have to worry about losing our uniqueness by.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and actually, to reference Sandra Walters again, she speaks to that of she mentioned a few times of, own, if you know why you're here, own it, and that you can own that. I know why I'm here, and I can continue to, that is part of ego. If you think about it, we do need ego to anchor us into like what we're here to do, but that's so unique, but we can own it, and that is what we're here to do, is speak it, and be seen in it. And
I love that. And also recognize that what we're here to do can change based on the choices that we make moment to moment.
Definitely.
I lost my train of thought again, because you said something. I was like, ooh, we should talk about that, but it's gone out the window. I'm just going to pause this just for a second. Okay, we're back. So we kind of wanted to end, we could go literally all day. So we kind of wanted to talk a little bit about like what we're experiencing right now that has been a really big theme for like Jess and I personally this week. And this is, I know, a theme for a lot of people because I've had this conversation with other sisters and friends and family. And that's part of the reason I did a video recently on parasites. So Jess, you mentioned you were having a lot of body discomforts. You want to go into that role briefly?
Sure. Yeah, I've been having like really massive headaches, and I never get headaches. So tons of headaches, like body aches, and just extreme fatigue, like to the
Yes.
point of having to cancel like 2 days in a row of sessions and just sleep. Like it's been intense.
Yeah, so I know some, I've had that too, and then immediately I have, well, you've probably got the corona.
Oh yeah, I mean everybody wants take your temperature, and like
Yeah,
if you say I'm actually upgrading my DNA right now, everyone will think you're crazy.
yeah. Oh no, you've just got, so I love that because here's a perfect example of different perspectives. One
Yeah,
person
right.
sees it as this, another person sees it as that. I see the flu always as an upgrade anyways, not that you've had the flu, but I've had it too. I even woke up this morning, like really like, whoa, really achy. And then it passes. So for me, it's been the same thing. And I have a couple other like people I've talked to the same thing. I have a client, she's like, she had such bad headaches that she had to go and go to the doctor. She got tested to make sure she didn't have the Rona. And she was fine. And she had to sleep for like 4 or 5 hours. And then she felt better. And that is part of it. It's not feeding into something's wrong.
Yep.
Recognizing that we're upgrading. It's like, okay, something good is happening. My body is adjusting. I'm integrating, or things are, density is moving out and light is coming in.
Yes.
Um, and I don't want to get into all of this. Sometimes we can get hooked on those body things and they can become part of our story. And they were certainly part of my story years ago because this isn't the first time I've experienced these kinds of things. Like this has been going on for me. I don't know about you, Jess, but for years.
Oh
Just
yeah. And
really strong right now.
exactly. Yeah. And like what I can handle as far as like my diet and things like that, or even like my environment, everything, it's just changed over the past few years, and it's just really intensified right now.
Yeah. And I think so. That's another thing is it's okay. We're all experiencing it. Everybody is experiencing this to a certain extent, even if they don't realize it. They might blame it on something else, not realizing, oh, I've got a headache. It might be that
Yeah.
their crown chakra is expanding and opening up. It might be that they had a huge, so you guys, everything in our body is a universe in itself. So our bones, we have crystals inside of us. We are conductors. So it's really important to recognize that these are some of the experiences that a lot of people are having right now. It's very normal. Drink a lot of water.
Yep.
Eat the right foods moment to moment. You might love meat. And all of a sudden you wake up one day and you cannot have meat. That's okay.
Yep.
It might go the other way around. I mean, there are
Mm-hmm.
some people that have been starting to crave certain proteins that they weren't craving before they were vegan. And all of a
Yep.
sudden they're like, I need protein. And that could come from broccoli or, it doesn't have to come from meat, but they might crave an egg. Who knows? But part of this, from my perspective, is honoring your body and recognizing that your body is going through this just as much as it's your vessel.
Mm-hmm.
And then where does this take you when you have these physical pains?
I have to just be present with the sensation instead of trying to figure it out. Kind of like we were talking about earlier. My brain wants to try and problem solve, but I have to always come back to there's no problem. This isn't a problem. There's something that's clearing, and so I need to honor it and self-care and create a supportive environment. But that's it. That's all I usually do.
Exactly. And again, that story, I would analyze it years ago. I would sit there and figure it out and go on WebMD.
Yeah.
I've got this must be wrong with me. Oh no. But I think many of us have gotten to the point, many of us know that this is part of this ascension, expansion. I don't even like to even call it ascension sometimes. I just like to call it expansion. It's like,
Yeah,
you know, we're just changing. And part of it is physical, basically all of it. Because
big part of it. Yeah. Yep.
it happens together, guys. So that's another thing that we've been experiencing. And for me, what happens sometimes is there are emotions attached with it. So you've ever listened to Eckhart Tolle, or is that how you pronounce his name, Tolle? He talked a lot about the pain body. And what happens is sometimes if we are really hooked into the story of our pain, and then it's heightened as we're going through this, it can bring up more of that pain body, and we can talk to it. We can have a conversation with it, but we can also give ourselves permission to even let that go, because it is all temporary. So I guess we could end on that note, and maybe we'll try to do this again next week.
Yeah, that'd be great. I would love to.
Providing everything works out, and we're talking about maybe doing a round table, and
and apparently I'm holding you to that. So.
Yeah. So Jess was in my dream last night, and she was like, we're gonna get together, and you need to come play. And so it was ironic that I'm just seeing. I want to talk about that a little bit too. Dream time, you guys. Dream time's been really vivid for myself forever. It's a lot more vivid for a lot more people lately. If you don't remember your dreams, it's not a big deal. You're integrating a lot in sleep, but recognize that sometimes we don't have to integrate it while we're awake. Sometimes we can do it while we're sleeping, and a lot of messages do come through. So it's important not to even judge that, just to recognize it and kind of be in alignment with that too, because sometimes I even can get into my head like, what did that mean? Well, why did I dream this? And that can make us feel certain lower frequencies if we attach ourselves too much to that. So it's detach, let it go, feel it, integrate it, and just allow, because then when we kind of be in that space of what you were referring to earlier is like 0 point or no time, things start to present themselves to answer the questions that we have. They start to show up.
Yep.
So
a lot faster.
Cool. So real quick though, any workshops that you have coming up, Jess, that you'd like to share?
My next one is in September. It's going to be my Yothera Foundations course. It's online and it's 4 weeks. It's for professional helpers and healers. And some people like to do the CEUs, but you don't have to do the CEUs, which is continuing ed credits for it. It's a really awesome blend of embodiment and just embodied psychology and shadow work. And so
very cool. Is this online or is this in person?
It's all online. I'm actually all remote now. So
nice. Yeah, cool. Yeah. Well, maybe I'll have to play in that too.
Yeah.
Being that I'm not anywhere near Boise. So I'm going to we'll end on that note, and thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I'll post all that info, and you guys can find Jess on Instagram on Yothera, and I'll put her link on there and everything too. So in love and light, guys, thanks so much just for tuning in and playing with us. Part of the reason we're doing this is just because we're just like everybody else, and everybody else is going through what we're going through in their own way and their own journey. And sometimes it's important just to share that and to bring it out so that people can be aware, hey, that's happening to me too, or I never saw it from that perspective before, or whatever. We're just here to kind of bring our own diversity and uniqueness in sharing the light and raising the frequency in our own way.
Love it.
So thanks, guys. Thanks, Jess.
Thank you.